It's infuriating to see our federal government continue to bring so called asylum seekers into our country when many of them don't have legitimate claims. And the American people are hurting right now. They want relief, but sadly, a lot of our resources are going towards this migration crisis going on right now. So I wanted to get your thoughts on all of this because so many Americans are feeling ignored right now.
I think it starts off with the whole idea the whole idea of people understanding what property is all about. Because I think it's an invasion of property when a government lets people come into the country and use the things that we pay for. So I think this is a big problem. But they also do it. This open border thing is done for political reasons and power reasons and who knows what. Not many honest reasons for humanitarian reason. They'd like us to believe that if you're not for open borders, you're not a humanitarian. They're always throwing that out there. We care about the people. That's why we have open cities and all this. What I'm saying is, everybody knows that you can't walk into your neighbor's house or anybody's house and say, "Oh, we need an extra room. We'll take the back room and march in." Even in this country where we have given up on privacy and private property in the market, we know that's wrong. But when the government does it to us, it upsets us. But we have to look at this because I see it all an invasion of privacy because the country, it's not a humanitarian thing. That's a lie, and they do that to make people feel guilty or patriotism. You're not a very good American if you don't open up the doors to allow these people who are homeless, come in. So to me, it's a principle thing. I think in a libertarian society, you do have immigration, but all of it is voluntary. It's not guided and directed and mandated by the federal government. What it does is you have to be able to take care of oneself. And we've had a lot of that for a long time. And the federal government was a minor factor in this. But now it's a deliberate policy. I ran as a libertarian back in 1988, and I remember this subject came up, and we had a discussion. They didn't know whether I was a libertarian or not because I was sort of back and forth dissecting and trying to figure out what the proper place was for immigration. I said, yeah, that's all fine and dandy to sort of have half open borders. But when does that, I remember very specifically saying, when does it become an invasion? I've decided in the last year or two, it has become an invasion, and we ought to pay a lot more attention to it.
Yeah, and it's one of the top topics that so many Americans really want both presidential candidates to go after. Kamala Harris now takes the stage and says, "Oh, well, when I'm president, I'm going to provide the country with border security," which is laughable given the fact that she is the border czar. So she has not been doing her job for the last 3.5 years at best. That's the best way to kind of phrase it, I guess. But then it's also enraging because Americans are now dealing with violence in their cities. There's Venezuelan gangs that have now taken over parts of major cities and suburbs as well. And so we're kind of having to just deal with this because the federal government's not assisting these people. And so many Americans kind of feel left behind. Now, you cited that you kind of alluded to this when you were running for president. But what do you see now that's been kind of a very alarming factor in all of this? Because now you're saying in the last year and a half, that this is an invasion. But what has really stood out to you?
Pardon me, what was the last word?
What has really stood out to you in all of this
Oh,
in
well,
regards to the invasion?
I think there's an ulterior motive behind it all. And we're talking about the strategy. The strategy is to invade this country and take it over because they're not bashful. The Marxists aren't bashful about the ultimate goal on how you bring about Marxism and collectivism, and that is create chaos. And I'd say they're doing a pretty darn good job of what their goals are. Economic policy, immigration policy, financial problems, the whole work. So first they let people in that are illegal to go in and steal property from the American people, and then don't. And then when the immigrants that come in, a bunch of them will disobey the laws instead of just making them obey the laws that are very readily apparent. Even the violence are permitted. and the government actually becomes a participant in it. Well, we're going to put you in here and in here and wherever to go. We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you free bus rides and hotel rooms and this whole thing. So but what does it do? It finally wakes up the people, and the people are waking up now, and they're very upset. And there's chaos in the streets. All you have to do is look at the evening news, and it's horrible. And then when you see the people, if you were going to limit the government to dealing with outright violence, they ignore it, but they don't even come close to it, because violence and chaos is what they want. They're getting it. The big question is, are we going to allow them to proceed the next step to having a greater authoritarian society, or are we going to wake up with more people like you speaking out and talking about this and saying, no, we're not going to put up with it. We're going to start talking about the principles that were laid out in our Constitution, that liberty is what our goal is, and not this whole welfare state, warfare state, and the bankruptcy that we've permitted under the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, and it's horrifying to watch on the sidelines as all of this continues to play out. Dr. Ron, I wanted to ask you as well about our rights, because not only are we losing land, but we're also losing our rights. We see the FBI director, Christopher Wray, give testimony regarding the open border and saying that we've never been this unsafe. And then they're asking for more money in their budgets and kind of growing the FBI from that angle, which is deeply concerning. But then we also watched as, sadly, the Republican House Speaker kind of just write off FISA and just give them a renewal without really pushing back much. So Americans are deeply concerned that under the Biden administration, we're watching our federal government grow and expand, and we're not really seeing any Republicans give pushback. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think they're positively opposed on principle. And this is a problem because we allow them. Because the principles that I have followed is that the government's not there to make us safe. The government is there to provide liberty for us, to give us the privilege of making ourselves safe. And that's why we have Second Amendment and property rights. And I think the whole idea, we weren't, this country wasn't born with an FBI or a CIA or a Secret Service. These agencies really are not, they're always corrupted. One of the most corrupt, of course, and I've written about this, is the corruption of the CIA, especially since the 1960s. I was very impressed with the politics and the wars of the 1960s. And believe me, that, as far as I'm concerned, it was a bit of a coup for our take our law and order. And and you say, oh, if you didn't have the FBI, who would catch the criminals? Well, they're not catching the criminals. They're part of the criminal element. And how about the CIA? They're the ones who commit all the coups around the world. And believe me, almost all of the assassinations, one way or another, eventually, the evidence shows that the government's been involved. Certainly it was what happened in the 60s, and we don't know how many people were involved with this recent attempt on Trump, but we do know that the Secret Service, they're not denying it. But the big question, did they just screw up, or was there some deliberate participation? Just to think of how many people have committed hatred towards the president. So they're all potential suspects. So that is a problem. But the agency itself becomes corrupted. That's it. When you have it, you may say, well, you have to have an FDA. They're going to protect us from, bad things that the drug companies will put out. Well, the FDA does the opposite. Just look at what they did to us under COVID. They do the opposite. They become part of the gang. And that's why it's so important for people to think in terms of the libertarian principle of you have responsibility. You ought to be left up to your life to your own. You can't hurt anybody, but you can't steal from anybody. Right now, the government is a thief. They steal from us. And, I have a bumper sticker, don't steal. The government hates competition. And I think that tells you a lot.
It does. It does. And they've expanded the IRS as well, hiring thousands of more agents to
Right.
go after Americans using AI to look at your bank records, even though that's illegal in itself. But there's very little pushback. And that's what's so enraging about all of this. But Dr. Ron, I wanted to also get your take on President Joe Biden. We've seen for the last 2 weeks he's been on vacation. He finally made his way back into the White House earlier this week. And most Americans are a little concerned because he doesn't look healthy. Obviously, he's not healthy enough to run for president. But now he's stepped aside from his candidacy and is just supposedly the president of the United States. But a lot of Americans don't think he's capable of running the country right now. What's your take on all of this?
Well, he isn't, but I can't remember any in my lifetime that I was positively supportive of and thinking, oh, they're doing a great job. They're protecting my liberties. Because as friendly as they may seem, I work on the assumption that most things are bipartisan. Bipartisan support for the Federal Reserve, interventionist foreign policy, the CIA, FBI. It's too much bipartisanship, and the spending. If it wasn't bipartisan, why would we have all these debts? And why don't we rein the government in? So yes, that it's a mess. To me, it's all a philosophic problem, a philosophic definition of what the government should be. The founders worked very hard to try to make sure that they could rein in the government, not allow the government to do it. But even then, they were skeptics. They say, we have delivered to the American people a republic, but the big question is, will they keep it? And right now, we don't have much left of the republic, except fortunately, there's still enough freedom for you to have your radio program and TV program, and our numbers are growing, and there's a remnant out there that's ready and raring to go. The main goal in my life is to stir them up and try to show that you don't have to resort to violence to solve these problems. You have to combat it with a better idea, and that, I think, is the goal that we should have, and how all good things come about is with better ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's critical too right now and educating the American people because so many people are coming out of, these public schools with a poor quality education. And it's like we watch these street interviews and when they interview people on the streets and ask them who they're voting for. And it's just heartbreaking to see how some people, there was a woman who didn't even know who the vice president of the country currently is. And she said that she's voting in November. And I was just like, oh gosh, no. But that's the times we live in right now. There's a lot of uneducated Americans. And I think we need to be the ones to educate them because the public schools aren't doing their job. So it's our responsibility for those of us who have shows to spread the word, and then for them, audience right now to kind of share these clips and make sure they circulate. But I also wanted to ask you before you go, of course, Dr. Ron, that you recently wrote a piece in regards to the tax plan that both President Trump and Kamala Harris have laid out. Both of them are promising tax credits. You've done a great job detailing those tax credits and kind of explaining that they're not really credits and it's not really good for our economy because we're in debt. So explain to our audience your take on both of their plans.
Yeah, it's they call it tax credit, and I thought, oh, they're not bad. I like tax credits because it isn't a deduction on it to cut down on your taxes. But if you have a bottom line, you owe the government, $1 million, and you get a credit, you take it off right off the million. If they give you a deduction, then it's a smaller percentage. So the tax credits are much better, but that's what they call it because other people think the same as I was saying that it's a benefit. But what about if you've only made $5,000 and you haven't essentially no payment, you don't owe anything. They give you a credit, which is a bonus. They send you a check instead of asking you for a check. They send you a check. So it's a form of a sneaky way to provide for welfare. But that's all what inflation is all about, too, because they say, well, we're going to give the middle class whatever they want, and then it will destroy the value of the money. And then we take the value of their dollar, and all they can complain about is the business people gouging them, and they can blame it on the businesses for gouging them. At the same time, it's this taxation, and that's what this tax credit is all about. It's deception, it's a tax, and it has to be government is a thief. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. People should be able to keep their own activities. If you're going to have services by the government, they should be at the local level. That's what was intended. And yet, what we have is we have all these agencies of government, all the lobbyists in government. It isn't a government. And most people say, well, if you didn't have this, I mean, who would feed the starving? Who would provide all this wonderful education? Well, just look at how the government took care of COVID. Weren't they wonderful on how they did it? That attitude has to change.
Yeah, yeah, and the pandemic was a game changer for so many Americans. I know myself, my view on everything completely shifted. So it was a great awakening moment for many. I mean, I thought, the government's not as bad as we thought, as people were making it seem, and then I quickly learned. So that's
good. You're
that's
a learner.
a learning experience. Yes, yes. Well, Dr. Ron Paul, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining me today. To our audience at home, I want to remind you he has a great show over at Rumble. That link is in the description of this interview. So make sure you click that and give him a follow. We appreciate your time, sir, as always. Thank you for everything you've done for this country and you continue to do as well. Thank you.
Great to be with you.
Okay, if you haven't done so yet, I don't really know what you're waiting on. There's a great sale going on right now over at mypillow.com. You gotta head over there before this sale ends. It's Mike Lindell's $25 extravaganza. He has bed sheets, pillows, towels, dog beds, dog blankets. So many of your favorite items, including slippers and sandals, are on sale right now. Now, if you want to lock in those prices, of course, you got to use promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE to do just that. Again, folks, head over to mypillow.com. We don't know how long this sale is going to last. Use promo code BRE to save the most money, of course. That's promo code BRE.